transactions, and some of the odd moves, some of the surprising ones, and what may lie ahead as not only the rest of the league, but the Winnipeg Jets themselves prepare for a few more trade transactions. All of that coming right up on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, happy Friday and welcome to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just really love and appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being the right fit, and the same can be said for your vehicle. Find parts that fit by heading over to eBay Motors and looking for the green checkmark. Stay in the game with eBay's Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Like I said at the top of the episode, tonight's show is going to be focused on the trade stuff that's been going on and how crazy it's been, relatively speaking. It feels like right now the league is going through a bit of a cap dumping, if we're being honest. Just take yesterday's trades. We had the Detroit Red Wings making a swap with the Edmonton Oilers, and the Oilers got future considerations. Future considerations doing a lot of heavy lifting there. What did the Red Wings acquire? Well, they got Klim Kostin and Kailer Yamamoto. Now, Yamamoto, of course, at one point was thought to be a very talented prospect, somebody that I think Edmonton really had high hopes for, but it turns out he just didn't really align to expectations, and he's been just okay over the past couple of years. Klim Kostin, another player who's going to need a new contract, and was actually weighing going back to Russia. So, in this case, it really is just a cap dump. Yamamoto is kind of one of those interesting players where I feel like he has a lot of the skills and traits to be a good player, but for some reason, it just never really coalesced into a really firm package. So for the Red Wings, I mean, it's a bit of a gamble, right? Kyler could maybe become a solid middle six player for them, but whether that's really worth like a $3 million cap hit, I don't know about that. But I mean, it is what it is. In terms of just a free player, you could maybe take a swing on. Hey, could be worse, right? We also had another kind of similar trade where the New York Islanders have swapped to be determined for Josh Bailey and a 2026 second round pick headed to Chicago. Bailey, obviously, he's kind of nearing the end of his career, but he signed to a pretty big extension a couple of seasons ago. And Chicago basically needs to get cap compliance. So this deal, not so bad. If you're the Hawks, you get a second round pick out of it, even though it's not really soon. So I don't know if that's great. But I guess the positive spin is that by the time that pick comes around, the Isles will probably be pretty bad. So maybe it ends up being a late, almost like a late first rounder. I don't know. But you're kind of seeing, again, a lot of teams doing all of this cap dumping and really not asking for anything in exchange. But, I mean, yeah, it's interesting, right? I thought the Isles would have to pay more to get rid of Bailey's contract, but I guess not. Similarly, Vegas did their own thing by sending Riley Smith to the Penguins, and this one brought a 2024 third-round pick. Interesting, I guess. I didn't think Pittsburgh would really pay a lot for this, and they didn't, but I mean, look, Smith's a solid player. I think in terms of his productivity, we've kind of been seeing it ticking downwards over the past season or two. He is getting up there in age, and, the Penguins, they got rid of Zucker, so I guess they brought in Smith, but I don't really know if that's an upgrade necessarily, but I mean, okay, sure. If we're also talking about kind of odd, picks and stuff, or trades, odd trades. Tampa Bay ended up sending Ross Colton to the Colorado Avalanche for, I think, the 37th overall pick or something this year. Not a bad one. And, I think for me, Colorado doing their trade the other day where they ended up sending Alex Newhook to Montreal and getting a first-round pick and a second-round pick. One of those was the 37th overall pick that became Ross Colton. I mean, that's just really good business. You turn Newhook into Colton and another pick. Plus Gianni Fairbrother. I don't know anything about Fairbrother, but the reality is, I mean, they basically just took a solid player that they drafted, but somebody who wasn't really looking to be exceptional, and turned it into a nice set of assets, and Ross Colton, who is probably an upgrade. So Colorado continuing to do really smart things. Good trade, you got to say, good trades. The last trade that we'll talk about for a sec is Tyler Toffoli for Igor Sharangovich and a 2023 third round pick. This for the Flames, I mean, I guess is an okay-ish move. The thing with Toffoli is that he put up a pretty monster season, and I feel like the Flames kind of treated him like a cap dump when he's really not. Tyler is still a very good player. I think in terms of immediately sliding into New Jersey's top six, he's an easy fit. I don't really understand why Sharangovich really was the centerpiece of this trade. I feel like Toffoli should have been worth a good deal more than that. But, I mean, hey, whatever, I guess. We've seen some really talented players basically going for nothing. Kevin Hayes was dumped for a 2024 sixth-round pick, if you can believe it. Mackenzie Blackwood somehow got a sixth-round pick. Just a lot of dumping of contracts that teams don't want. And it's kind of funny because, I don't know, there's just not really any, legit value. I would actually say in terms of both teams kind of coming away with stuff that they want. LA and Winnipeg probably had the most two-sided trade. Most of these other trades are just somebody foisting their cap crap on somebody else. So very funny offseason so far. We're really waiting for more blockbusters after this Dubois trade. And from what I understand, a bunch of players are apparently not getting qualified over the next 48 hours. So that's going to be really interesting to see who becomes an active free agent. Now, of course, all of this kind of misses on the fact that the Jets might have two of the biggest trades to go, and we'll talk about where those trades and the status of those are kind of sitting right now as Hellebuyck and Scheifele await their fates. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Athletic Greens. Our next partner is AG1, the daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. I drink it literally every day because I was looking for a boost to my immune system, something to get me going on my daily routine, all of that fun stuff. Now, AG1 is great because it gives you 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens, all in a convenient one scoop in a cup of water package. You really can't go wrong with it. There's no weird GMOs, no additives, and it's been backed by science and over 7,000 five-star reviews. Tons of people, whether they're pro athletes or trainers or just regular old fitness enthusiasts, have given AG1 a shot, and I really recommend it for you as well. It's great, it's affordable, and it's a micro habit that delivers macro benefits and just helps everybody with their daily routines. Helps you take care of your health, and you really can't go wrong with something that really is as simple as one scoop that costs less than $3 a day in a cup of water. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs of AG1 with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL Network. Check it out. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for returning as we are talking about Winnipeg basically preparing for what could be a pretty interesting next 48 hours or so. The Jets, in all likelihood, are about to buy out Blake Wheeler. I can't believe it's gotten to this point. I can't say I really expected it, but here we are. Wheeler, obviously, we've talked about over the past couple of years. He has been slowing down. It's not a shock. a buyout kind of feels like the natural resolution to what's been a little bit of a painful process. The Jets have been desperately trying to trade him somewhere, but let's be real. The Jets don't want to retain salary and probably don't want to pay to move his deal. So in my mind, I think Winnipeg would rather just bite the bullet, have his cap hit of like $2 million or something for a couple of seasons, and just kind of be done with it. I mean, Blake going his separate way and getting to chase a ring elsewhere, I think would suit the Jets. I think the biggest thing is it helps save face. The cap hit and penalty is relatively minimal, and really you just sort of end what's kind of been a bit of an ongoing dramatic saga, right? Wheeler's been blamed for a lot of leadership issues, blamed for dividing the locker room, and he's just getting up there in years. So this kind of feels like we'll be seeing it announced at some point today. A buyout. Wow. Can't believe we're at this stage. The Jets really don't buy out very many contracts to begin with, so the fact that this one's about to get exercised is very interesting. Now, Wheeler, obviously a major player for this team, but probably not the biggest trades that we're really waiting for. The Dubois was the big chimichanga, the mega deal, the one that's really going to turn heads. But the Jets still have two more superstars they need to deal. Connor Hellebuyck still sounds like he is bound for New Jersey at some point, but it doesn't really sound like there's been that much traction on a deal, which is interesting, right? The Devils traded away Mackenzie Blackwood, and I thought, well, there's your starter role, right? That's for Hellebuyck easily. But in the meantime, there's just been radio silence. Not really a lot going on with New Jersey. Haven't really heard about any sort of movement on that front. I don't know if Hellebuyck specifically wants to go there. It's been rumored that he has had an interest in the Devils, but I don't know more beyond that. And because he's asking for like $9 million plus on his next deal, I think a lot of teams that would typically trade for him have been very hesitant because you don't want just one season of Hellebuyck. You want multiple. But if you're talking about multiple seasons and he's talking about $9 to $9.5 million, you're going to find it really hard to get a match for a team that's willing to shell out that much for a goalie. You might argue that Hellebuyck is worth it because he is like the second most valuable player in the league next to McDavid, thanks to the sheer amount of goals that he saves above replacement. And I think that there is an argument for that. But I think the other question is you're putting $9.5 million into one player who is a goalie and can't score for you. How much of his goal saving ability is really worth that price tag, right? When you're paying that much money, usually you're paying it to elite forwards or elite defenders, less so elite goalies. We don't really see that as much. Most goalies are in like the $5 million to $6 million bracket, and that's kind of on the higher end. So I think what Helly's asking for him in particular is fair, and I don't hate it, but I think a lot of teams are looking at that and saying, oh, there's no way in heck we can afford that. And for me, I get it. I think a lot of teams are probably not far off in evaluating that maybe having an MVP caliber goalie is not maybe enough if you don't have enough depth elsewhere in your lineup. That goalie is not going to be able to score at the other end of the ice, and so you really need to find and invest in rolling four deep lines, which I think Vegas did a very good job of. Now, all that said, I still feel like Hellebuyck, me personally, I would have handed him a blank check, but that's just me. I love Helly. I'll always be partial to him, and it sucks that we're watching him go elsewhere. Scheifele, on the other hand, is kind of a question mark. I really feel like he is a very valuable player that can fit with at least 4 or 5 teams. There have been some suggestions all over Boston. Maybe even the Rangers have been a potential thought. A lot of teams could use him, but I don't know who's going to give the Jets a decent trade package. And the reality is with both Helly and Scheifele, the Jets are not going to get the same return that they got for Dubois. So just keep that in mind. Know that the return is going to be a little more modest, but there's still a chance for the Jets to come out winners if they play their cards right. Now, all of this stuff being said, I've got a couple of major steps that I want the Jets to go through over the next few weeks and months as they prepare for their next season. We'll talk about what those really important steps are in just a moment. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us for these final thoughts in tonight's episode. I just wanted to quickly go over a couple of thoughts on what Winnipeg's next steps should be. Obviously, the draft just happened. The Jets traded Dubois, and they're exploring trading a few more players. But after that, it kind of gets to be a point where you're not really sure what's happening with this team. And I feel like this is the offseason where I have the most uncertainty, because I really feel like the Jets could go in about 30 different directions, and I have no idea which one is the right one. The one thing we do know is that the Jets are trying to be relatively competitive. So I think, for one thing, chasing Travis Sanheim should be one of the steps that they take. And the Flyers are going to be really desperate to dump his contract at the end of today, because I think after today, I want to say either tomorrow or sometime in the very near future, his no trade clause goes into effect. So suddenly the field of teams that he could be moved to goes bye-byes, and the Flyers don't want to be locked into his cap hit. Now, I think he's actually a very good player and will be very good for that price, but I don't know if the Jets are going to be the ones to really pull the trigger. I think Winnipeg can reasonably get a relatively cheap price for him, but I don't know what the Flyers would consider cheap. So is it a second rounder and a mid-tier prospect? Is it something else, like a roster player? I have no clue. I just hope that the Jets don't overpay if they do go after Sanheim, but I have heard Winnipeg cooled their interest recently after not really seeing a natural fit with their prospects and picks. So something to keep an eye on, but maybe the Jets can take advantage of a desperate Philadelphia Flyers and get a cut rate price for a nice Manitoban player. So that'd be fun. I think the other step that kind of is related to that is sorting out the defense. Obviously, Pionk, Dillon, Schmidt, and DeMello all bring varying levels of value to the blue line, and the Jets are going to have to unclog it somehow. You've got Chisholm, Heinola, and a few others who are starting to stake their claim towards really deserving more ice time. Elias Salamanson won't be far behind. So a lot of these guys are going to need space, and right now the Jets don't have a lot. And a lot of those players that I just mentioned also come with relatively big cap hits. So if the Jets want to make additions up front and rework the back end as well, they're going to have to, kind of trade some defenders. And this could be where, maybe you swap a roster player with Philly for Sanheim. I think that's a better use of the cap space. Maybe you try and see if Pionk could go elsewhere. I don't think they have any intention of trading Neil, so just get used to that. But otherwise, Brendan Dillon's probably expendable. I would not be surprised if Dylan DeMello gets moved. Nate Schmidt certainly should be on the block as well. I imagine he's probably not a player the Jets are all that keen on keeping. So a lot of moving parts, but a lot of options. I guess my third major step, and one that I hope is relatively soon, is extending Gabe Vilardi to a longer-term deal. I feel like it's time to gamble on him. I know that he's got a lot of red flags about his health and stuff, but you know what? Sometimes you just have to sort of take it as it goes. I feel like Vilardi long-term is going to be a relatively okay bet. If he really lands and becomes the player that I think he can be for the Jets, I really feel like Winnipeg really didn't downgrade from Dubois. I know that that's going to be unpopular with some Kings fans, but I feel like Vilardi is a phenomenal player. I think it's more just high praise for Vilardi than anything, because Dubois at his best can be an unstoppable monster. You just have to get him motivated and caring out there. But I think Vilardi, for me, is very underrated. I think he's a phenomenal player. And so long as he stays healthy, I am really excited to see what he does for the Jets. But Winnipeg over the next few weeks, they've got lots of stuff to do. They've got contract extensions. They've got trades coming up. All of it. I mean, I just don't know what this team's going to look like here at the end of the summer. But by the time October rolls around, I'm kind of excited to see the new team. I wouldn't mind some really big changes, some fresh blood, maybe a few interesting signings or something that can bring some quality depth scoring, or maybe even a little bit of middle six help. But in the meantime, we're just going to have to sit tight and hope the Jets make the right moves. We will be back probably with a bonus episode this weekend just to make up for the one that we missed earlier this week. And I'll walk through some more off-season stuff and talk about any major developments on the Jets trade or buyout fronts as Winnipeg starts to whittle down their contract count. But for tonight's show, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day, and hope to see you back here tomorrow. As always, thanks for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.